Hey Jakarta Life Groups, this is the intro video for our discussion on the sermon series, Let's Be Honest, where we go through all the different Psalms of the Bible and we talk about that psalmist's relationship and intention towards God.
Yes. I mean, the Psalms is a book made up of different types of Psalms, man. There's Psalms about love, heartache, fears, sadness, anger, and I mean, the overall theme is in
But there's
all.
good stuff too,
Yeah,
right?
there's good stuff. There's joy. There's songs.
Like those are some really miserable psalmists.
No.
Horrible Christians.
There is also songs of joy and songs of
Yeah.
rejoicing and praise,
Yeah.
and how they're just so in awe of who God is.
Yeah.
Right. But I think the overall theme of them all is that in that pain or in the joy, they are completely honest.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we can all agree that that is the faith that we are called to live, a life of honesty before God.
Yeah.
And I think that sometimes that might look different for other people or to us, and it can be very challenging.
Yeah, that's like another one of those ideas, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like you hear about it in church, this posture before God where you're completely honest, you're very real, vulnerable. You say, these are my struggles, these are my fears, these are my sins, these are my joys, these are my desires. And we hear that in church, but when we actually begin to walk that out, that can seem really ambiguous.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so what does that mean? Like, when I'm in the car, do I just start telling God all my sins for the week?
Yeah.
When I'm in the office and I'm tempted by a girl, do I say, oh God, I would love to be with that woman? Or, what does that look like?
Yeah.
But I think some of the great points throughout the sermon series has been that it can look like anything.
Yeah.
And it can very much look different.
Yeah.
I think in Psalms 146, the psalmist is writing all about how he had been very disenfranchised about his relationship with man and the authority on earth. So he writes this psalm about how he's learned that the authority on earth and even the wisest people on earth aren't going to please him or bless him or satisfy him like God can.
Yeah.
Getting direction from these places isn't going to be good as the direction he gets from God. So he just opens up his life and he talks about how that's how he learned to go to God. It's almost like a testimony of his journey of faith that he wrote down to encourage us.
Yeah. Wow. And I think there's just such power in being vulnerable, and
Yeah.
I think a lot of times it's seen as weakness, right? Or it's scary to put yourself out there and have the possibility of being rejected or not being understood.
Yeah.
And I think both of those things are very, if you stand on the vulnerable side, are very scary and crippling if they're not reciprocated, right?
Yeah.
And I think what's amazing about the Psalms is that every time we saw man, in that the psalmist received peace, or they got the sense of man, I'm going through all this stuff, I feel all this pain, but I know who you are, right? Yeah. And they always bring it back to God's identity and who he is, and I feel like that's the hope we can look to, right, when we are vulnerable.
Yeah, and I think something that we cannot forget about as we read through the Psalms and we really listen to these messages about these stories of the psalmist's relationship with God is that change of being vulnerable doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah.
You don't go home on Sunday after church and say, okay, I know all my feelings, I know all my desires, I know all my sadness, and I can just give it to God right now.
Yeah.
That takes discipline and time of reflection. Sometimes I'm upset and I don't even know what I'm angry about. I have to take time and journal and write it out and write down my feelings till I finally get to the root of what I'm actually angry about.
Yeah.
I know Janae, when she is really, really frustrated, she literally needs silence. She'll go into the bedroom, no music, no nothing, no kids screaming, mommy. She just sits there with her eyes closed and she just sits in solitude and just lets God speak to her.
Where for me, it's I have to talk it out.
Yeah.
I have to be able to talk with someone about it. Yeah. If I didn't already choose to shut down, right? So I think when I am vulnerable, I have to have someone that I confide in, my best friend, or just sitting there with Jesus and saying this is how I feel, as crazy as it may sound, as crazy as I may feel, but that verbal
processing.
And throw up. It's that's what helps me understand, oh, I feel that way, or maybe this is how I feel. I think that it can look very different.
Yeah, so I think that's really important that we realize the first step about being honest and vulnerable with God is sometimes we just need to be intentional about taking that time throughout our day and stopping. You know, the thing about Jakarta life is it's so busy.
Yeah.
It's so crazy. We're always in a rush. We're always reactive instead of active because you never know what's going to happen. So like, I think if you don't make the intention to say, I'm going to start my day with 30 minutes or my lunch break, I'm going to take 30 minutes and just journal, or I'm going to talk with a friend, or I'm going to read, or I'm going to have solitude, whatever it looks like, we're not even going to know where to start as far as being honest. We're not going to know what to be honest about.
Yeah.
Right? I think we need those times when we sort out our feelings and we process it and we talk it out. Then we can go to God and we say, God, this is how I feel. Why do I feel this way? Why do I see you this way? Right? And that's when he can meet us where we are. He can help just work in us and through us to show us like our feelings and validate us and where we are in our journey.
Yeah.
You know, and the greatest thing about all the Psalms that I think we're going through is really this deeper understanding that not only are all our feelings valid, but God wants to use all of our emotions and all our feelings, positive and negative, to shape us more into this image of his son, Jesus Christ. Wow. That's what this whole journey of faith is all about, where he can say, yeah, you feel like this because this is who I created you to be. Yeah. And you're going through this because this is who I created you to be. You know, I've heard often said that anybody can make it through anything if they understand the greater purpose. And Jesus, when we take our feelings to him, I think his desire is really to show us that greater purpose and say, thank you so much for bringing this to me, because now I can show you how I want to use this in your life to do the work that I'm calling you to do. Yeah. So I'm excited. I think it's going to be a great discussion. I think you guys have lots to talk about as we share about the different messages that we've heard about the Psalms.
Yeah. And we have amazing messages coming to you because it's a 6-week series.
6-week series.
So we're excited about what God's going to do in you guys and in your groups, and we hope to see you soon. Bye.